Hello there and welcome. Uh, Thank you for joining us. My name is Andy Northrup. I work here at the Eugene Public Library, and I just am thrilled that you all are joining us today. And for those of you who may not know or clicked on this by accident, we have an author talk this evening with Noe Alvarez, who wrote a book called Spirit Run, a wonderful memoir. Before we get to Noe, I just wanted to thank the Friends of the Eugene Library and the Eugene Public Library Foundation for supporting our programming and making events like these happen. We appreciate it, and we love doing these kinds of things. We love being able to talk with authors, so thank you. With that being said, I am delighted to be joined tonight by Noe Alvarez. He is the author of a memoir called Spirit Run, a 6,000-mile marathon through North America's stolen land. It was first published in the spring of 2020, and it was a New York Times Editor's Choice and bestseller. And so thank you, Noe, for joining us. We're going to bring you into the room now.
Thank
Hello.
you. Hey, how you doing? Thank you for having me, and thank you to the Eugene Library. Appreciate y'all having me.
Oh gosh, it's our pleasure. Yeah, we are thrilled to be able to chat with you tonight. So I thought maybe we could start, as I sort of made a bad joke about earlier, someone who may be clicking on this not knowing what to expect, or maybe someone who is interested in your book but hasn't gotten around to reading it yet. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey, both in terms of how you ended up running a 6,000-mile marathon and how this book came to be.
Gotcha. No, thank you for that question. I think it's a lot to it, right? I mean, I'm originally from a small town called, Yakima, Washington, not that far from where you are at, and I come from a, immigrant, Mexican immigrant, working class family. Raised in the apple orchards, working alongside my parents. And so my reality was that. My reality was sort of complicated relationship with the landscape. And so all I knew about that reality was to get out. And so what that meant was going to school and trying to save my family by going to college, and that didn't work out well for me. So I dropped out, which happened to coincide with a run known as Peace and Dignity Journeys, a ceremonial movement between organized by the indigenous First Nations group across North, Central, and South America. And so I was 19 at the time, and it was a run that I decided to do. It was perfect timing. It was a sort of education that I needed at the time that I wasn't getting in college at the time, and that I wasn't getting at home. And so I lived in this really complex narrative of people who tilled the land in ways that was displacing them. There was a lot of spiritual connection as a people to the land, but the way that my parents experienced it and the way I witnessed them experience it, applying pesticides to the land, picking and harvesting, just sort of utilizing the landscape for something else was sort of complicated for me. And so for me, my dad told me, get out, this is not something I want for you. This is not the life that I want for you. And I was deeply enamored with the landscape, right? I wanted to love it. I wanted to stay. I wanted to do something more deeper for my people, but I had an obligation to my family and to my dad's wishes to get out, and I didn't know what that looked like. So luckily, Peace and Dignity Journeys carried me into just an incredible world, and it taught me how to be human again. It taught me how to sort of have confidence in my story, and so Peace and Dignity Journeys is a book about a lot of things, but I hope it means different things to different readers, and I hope it resonates with the large community out there. So I don't know if that explains anything.
Oh, absolutely, and thank you for that. Yeah, and I should have said in my intro too. We have some conversation points to go over, but for the folks that are watching now, we'll do a Q&A session at the end too if you have any other specific questions. But thank you for that. I think that's wonderful just to give people a little bit of context. And I have a few conversation points that we came up with from having some book groups. We've got some very engaged Eugene readers. If anyone is watching now or recording later, we're going to maybe get into some details of the book. If you do want to go read it and you don't want to know anything, now would be your time. Go read the book. It's really fantastic. And maybe, come back. Or if you don't mind knowing a few things, then that's also fine too. So one thing I just was interested in chatting about, we have the World Athletics Championships coming to Eugene from July 15th to 24th. Eugene is, it's track town, USA, where the track is very much in the heart of the town. We, as a library, were really interested in finding a book about running, but also interested in a story that went a little bit deeper than just athletics. And so I was curious if you could just touch on when you first realized running wasn't just an activity for you, that it was actually connecting you to something more.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks for that. I think I didn't know that I was deeply immersed in that act until much later, and until Peace and Dignity Journeys taught me that running was something more profound, something more deeper than what I thought it was. I recall so many times wanting to make sense of my world, and sort of take a step back to reflect, and I didn't know how to do that other than running alongside the river, the Natchez River in Yakima, and I would run to the river and run alongside it, and I found my peace. I try to sort of acclimate myself in a different kind of rhythm that was separate from the working class sort of rhythms of the working class, of the warehouses where my mom, worked and continues to work, and so in the rhythms of just working and toiling in the fields. And so that was the rhythm that my family introduced to me. And so for me, I guess I was already searching for meaning through my body before I had the words. Just like when I grew up, I didn't know English. I didn't have the words to communicate, and so oftentimes I utilize my body as a way to communicate, and find meaning. And so for me, I had a lot of words to dislodge, and the run allowed me to do that. And so I'm glad you brought that Eugene is marathon country. And so I encourage the people who are doing that at least for Peace and Dignity Journeys, it was so much more than just burning the calories and accomplishing and conquering the miles. It was about carrying a specific story. It was about carrying your community. It wasn't a solo act. Even though we did run oftentimes alone, it was more about what is it that moves you forward? What is it that you're dedicating yourself to? And, generally it would be something greater than yourself. And so what we would carry on the run is a story like of trauma or of joy or a passion. And for me, every day was a different reason to run. Every day carried my mom's story, my dad, and then the people that I would meet all along North America who had very inspiring stories. So, and then I would run, and then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, the run was over, and it was 15 miles later, and I was just in the zone. I was connecting to the story through the landscapes that I was running through. And so there's a lot of power in our story. And so for me, I think, if you're a runner and you're trying to find a different way to connect with your landscape, connect with your story, and you'll find yourself having a lot of power to it. And not just for the runners too. I mean, just getting out of nature and walking and taking time to connect with yourself on a periodic basis is important for us to heal in our community. So,
Yeah, and I think maybe on that note, I did have a question I had to ask because your book was published in March of 2020. Heck of a time for a book to be coming out.
mhm.
So I wonder, just what was that like having a book published right as COVID was sort of just shutting everything down, and um, yeah, the reason I thought of that is just you saying that it's to kind of heal communities and to keep us mentally in a good space, running and activity and all that. So is there any do you think people maybe connected with your book for that reason too? Because COVID was a time when we were all looking for ways to just get outside, move our bodies, and keep our minds healthy.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I mean, this is my first book, and I really didn't know what touring would be. I had been touring book conventions before and did a couple of public talks, and it was fun either way for me. It was nice to engage in this talk and building community through this. But I think like anything else, it yeah, it interrupted the flow a little bit, but I think it was an opportunity to reinvent yourself. These are just opportunities to sort of um, reconnect with yourself and make time, create solutions to who you're doing. Um, I'm not sure. I Yeah. So, anyways, for me, I think a powerful message for people during COVID. I think people, were given the time to reflect on their lives a bit more, and so for me, we were doing that on the run already, and um, I don't know. I think it was received really well. I was really really happy about that. I found myself out there in so many different places in the world. People have been reaching out to me since from all over the world, about how this story resonated with them. And I'm fortunate enough that this book got translated into you know French, and it's out there in France circulating. And so I'm just blown away by how many people this story is reaching. And so I think that people are realizing that running is a language, and so I think it's a common language that people can relate to and can speak to. And so maybe I think that's one of the many reasons that this book has connected with so many people. And um, I was just bringing attention to ceremony, running as a ceremonial act, and I guess all that means is just making time on a regular basis to connect with yourself, confront those really difficult aspects of your life, to find healing. And sometimes we don't have that framework to fall back on. Sometimes, we don't want to confront very heavy things because we feel like we'll fall to pieces. And so for me, that's how I felt as a kid. I didn't want to confront the heavy aspects of my life because if I did that, I'd crumble to pieces. I didn't have anything to hold me. And so finally, Peace and Dignity Journeys gave me this framework, running as my medicine. And so now I know I have courage to check in with those difficult things about myself, knowing that I can fall back on running, knowing that running is always going to carry me there and it's always going to give me the power to sort of continue. And so hopefully that can be available to others as well.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's really, that's even more of a connection than I was thinking when you said like time to check in and make room for ceremony and sort of being present and really interrogating oneself. I feel like that
Mhm.
was an experience so many people had during COVID, especially, and everyone had a project. Whether it was like sourdough starters or I'm going to read War and Peace, and I'm sure there were tons of people out there who were just like, well, I guess I'm a runner now, so I'm going to start doing that.
Right.
Um, and I think there's a special power to reading a book that describes a very lengthy journey when one is cooped up in their house and not able to go very far. So I think that
Right.
was that was probably a great thing for some people. Speaking of that, of your actual journey, I was wondering if, again, maybe for folks who read your book a while ago and it's been a minute, or for maybe people who haven't yet, what was the actual route that you took? Where did you start and where did you end on your run?
Gotcha. Yeah. So the time that I joined the run in 2004, the run started in northern Arctic village, Alaska, and ended in the Panama Canal. At the same time, there's a southern run that started in Tierra del Fuego, Argentina, South America, and those runners ran north. So the goal was to meet in the Panama Canal as the endpoint and have ceremony there. So, but clearly not all the runners who started at the different endpoints finished. And so um, a lot of them did though, but the thing is, for me, I joined the runners later in Canada, north of Prince George, BC, Canada, and bought a one-way ticket and didn't look back. And I finished in Guatemala, Central America. So, and I talk about the reasons in the book and the lessons I learned from that and what that was and what it continues to be. Because the run happens every 4 years, and there's a reason for that, right? It means that the work isn't done. The work to better our communities and to help uplift one another isn't over. And so we have to make it a practice of returning. And so going back to the launch of the tour in 2020, that was also the year that Peace and Dignity Journeys was going to launch another run, and I was going to partake in that, but that got postponed. And so every time the run happens, it expands. And so at various points of the run, when I joined in 2004, it split. There was a coastal route, and then there was an inland route. I was mainly coastal route, but the reason we split so often was we were trying to hit as many territories, indigenous nations as possible, because we were trying to carry that message as much through as many communities as possible. We were trying to connect with those stories that people had to tell about, the drug addictions, the overdoses, the decimated communities and landscapes, just taking in that trauma and then carrying that message down to other communities and connecting and try to build that fire in people so that they can take accountability for their communities again, and in a way that heals and brings people together. So it's all over now, all over the place. Peace and Dignity Journeys, I think, runs in Jamaica now. Everywhere where there's an indigenous community, that's where we want to be, right? And so people are organizing this for themselves. There's runs everywhere now, and that's the powerful thing about Peace and Dignity Journeys. It is very much community focused and community led.
Yeah, so and I noticed you use it as a plural there, that they really are. It's not just one journey. Like the one you took was starting in Alaska and going down the Pacific Northwest and then into Mexico. Are they all connected, or are they sort of their own organizations that do them at different times, and have different routes, or is it one organization that sort of organizes it from up top and then?
No, see, that's the thing. I think the movement is very conscious to sort of um, not dictate, right? It takes 4 years to organize it,
Yep.
and you try to empower the community. And so different territories had different ways of running through these communities, and we tried to honor that as much as possible without imposing. Because each indigenous community had a different way of honoring their landscape, a different story, and a different way to sort of respect the sacred territories that they were in that meant running different mileage, running through difficult terrain. We ran through the Tohono O'odham Nation in Arizona, and they wanted, like 6 runners at one time, spread as much as, so it was taxing on us, but it made the run, it made the message stronger. And so there's just different takes on how they wanted to contribute to the run and to their territory. So generally, a representative of those communities who lead us. We just go in and we meet them, and then they continue, and we follow in their steps. And so generally, there's someone in the community who leads the run through their territories, and we try to empower that. So we have kids that join us, elders who join us, and it's a very beautiful experience to be part of that, because it changes every day. And that's what I'm saying. I think the challenge of running, was different every day. The terrains that we were running into, and the people, and the emotions that we carried, were all over the place. And so yeah, it's all connected, but it's very much it varies very much, as it should, with the communities that represent each territory.
Yeah, and I think in your book, even within your group, we saw a lot of different ideas and different stories and customs. And as you said, you also you would stop at a different local community and things would be different. I think that's so well illustrated in the book. So thank you for that. Um, One thing I was also curious about too is, in the book, I think you, and then by in turn the reader, are kind of dropped into your peace and dignity journey as it was already happening, because you mentioned you joined it as it was going. Um,
Mhm.
and so it feels like we're alongside you, kind of figuring things out as you went. So I'm curious, now that you have looked back, 17, it's been 17 years, 16 years since the book came out. I wonder if there's anything you wish you knew now when you were going into it,
Hmm.
in 2004.
That's a great question. I don't think it continues to come back at me and teach me new things. You know what I mean? It's an ever evolving story, and the wisdom is ever evolving. It always comes back to me in different ways, different days. just when I'm not expecting a certain smell, I'm in a certain landscape, I'm in a certain way, and then I just remember certain things. And so that's the beauty of the run, that it never forgets you, and it always has a way of picking you up. And so I guess I don't think any information would have prepared me for it. You know what I mean? Like, I think each journey is very different to each runner, and so if you ask every runner what the run was to them, they'd tell you something very different, because we were in a different life stage. We were all trying to heal from a very different trauma. We all had a different motivation, but um, I really, I don't know. I mean, I was taken by surprise for sure. I had this naive sort of attitude about what to expect, and I mean that led to some challenges for sure. But the very nature of the run was not to indoctrinate you, was not to sort of impose a certain way. You know, I was always asking questions about how to run, how to do ceremony, how to, this and that. And for the most part, it was very much like, you just find your way, you just sort of tune in, because it was very much also a listening journey, right? And it was you coming into the space, finding your rhythm, finding your journey, and no one else could tell you that. And so it was a matter of just tapping into the landscape and the people and the stories, finding your place as much as possible. And I made that my mission, to be as open as possible, to be a sponge and soak it all in. And oftentimes that drove me to run harder than I should have, than my body could have been, handled. And so I was often running a lot, many more miles than my knees could endure, and sustaining injuries, because I was hungry for that next story. I was hungry for wisdom. I was hungry for those elders who had, it seemed to me that they had life figured out, and I was missing out on that. And there was such fire in their heart, and I wanted to carry that forward. And part of the journey, though, too, one of the many lessons is learning learning when to let go, learning, knowing when to quit as well. And sometimes you're needed somewhere else. And so for me, I had a hard time with that I sometimes forced myself into certain physical situations that I thought that's where I thought I belonged. And so, but anyways, years later, I'm still thinking about those moments, and I'm still learning, and I'm still reminded that the work is not over. And just because I did that run, I'm not so much wiser. I mean, like, I'm more hungry to put myself out there, and take in the wisdom of others who know so much more than I do. And so that's what the running community means to me.
Well, I think that also the way you described how the run stays with you. I think that also leads into another thing. Myself and some of our book group participants were really curious about, just in terms of, and you did actually kind of answer this earlier, but I'd love for you to elaborate. Are you still connected to the run? Like, are you in touch with the folks that you ran with specifically in 2004, and are you active in that community still?
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm in touch with some of the runners for sure. I tried doing the run 4 years later, and a couple years after that, and 4 years after I didn't last 3 days. So physically, I realized I'm not there anymore. But it always finds me. I'm always when I was traveling. If you ever see a body of runners carrying staffs with feathers on them, feel free to stop and ask what they're doing, and they're always open to a runner for that stretch at least. And so I'm just, surprised by this. And I remember I was driving through Utah not that long ago, and I saw a body of runners there, and I said, "Wait a minute, what's going on here?" So I pulled the car over, and I'm like, "Let me run some miles with you," and I just got out and did it. And so that's the beauty of the run. It's happening. People are doing their own run the way it ought to be, and you'll see them carrying these staffs, these visual reminders of sort of your responsibility to your community, these feathers that represent prayers, that represent people's stories and desires for the community. And so it's a very powerful visual reminder to carry these staffs. But yeah, I'm definitely connected to them. But like, the run is always with you, because it's more than just also physical running. It's like the symbolism of what running is. So whatever that means to you, it'll evolve, it'll change. And one day I'll get even older, and I won't be able to, I'll be able to run less. And so at the very least, my journey's not over. it just continues to change and um, gets more urgent for sure. The work, the older I get, to pass down that knowledge to our youth and our community and share that knowledge, getting out there. And so, yeah, very much connected, but also very much connected in spirit with the runners.
Thank you. That's wonderful. And just I like that you said, if you ever see a bunch of people running in the middle of nowhere with staffs, to stop and ask them what they're doing, because I don't know, I feel like me being a socially awkward person, I'd be like, oh, I better not interrupt them. They must be doing something that they don't want to.
No, it's powerful.
Yeah.
It's momentum. You know what I mean? And if you're pulled to it, I mean, you can ask. And there's usually generally an organizer. And when I was part of groups like that, I remember I was tired. It was nice to get someone to jump in on there and give me some energy and motivation. So
Yeah.
and so the whole goal is to build momentum and build this snowball effect of runners, and that we want to show people that we're out there, that we're not alone, that you're not alone. And so we're trying to show that we're out there in full force, trying to raise awareness. And so if you're called to that, if that speaks to you, then take that courageous first step and just ask that question. And that's what running is. It's literally taking that step, not that first step, not only that first step, but taking those steps towards those spaces that are scary, those communities that you think aren't for you or whatever. No, like, get into those very uncomfortable spaces, and you'll find a lot of wisdom, and people will respect you for taking the courage to move. And I think that's what we are in as a society. Is that I don't think we're crossing those boundaries. I think we need to sort of integrate a little bit more to figure out what's going on out there. And so, as scary as it is, and as scary as it was for me when I was 19, every day was a new place to go, and it was scary. But that's what running is about. It's about finding new places and discovering new people.
Yeah. And you talk about kind of staying connected, and how the run has evolved a little bit too. And I'm curious, your run was in 2004, very different time in terms of technology, especially. So I was kind of curious, like, do you think smartphones, social media, do you think those things have affected the peace and dignity journeys in any way, positively, negatively, possibly both, the way social media tends to?
Yeah, no, that's good. I imagine both, but I think, like, again, it's just an opportunity to sort of innovate, and I think um, it's allowed at least uh, a platform for communities that have generally been erased, right? Who now have a platform to visually show the run, that it's out there, and so I think that's done a lot of powerful things for the young folks for sure. But yeah, when I did the run, we didn't have the GPS. We were old school maps on hoods of cars and hoping for the best. And there's a saying on the run, if you're lost and you think you're lost, it's like, when in doubt, turn left. And just
Yeah.
keep running left. And so you'd be running in circles. The joke was that you'd be running in circles and eventually we'd find you. But if you're in the forest, like, I mean, it was difficult. A lot of us got lost. That's why we were tracking a lot of miles as a result of running the wrong direction. And it was very land based in focus. And so it was very important that if an indigenous community wanted us to run through a specific sacred site, that we ran through it specifically how they wanted us to and honor it the right way. And so if we didn't, we just had to go back. And there was a lesson to that. But yeah, I mean, I think there's powerful things that technology can be done. I haven't witnessed it on the run. I don't think it puts a run back, but I think when you're running, at least the whole point is to sort of not necessarily check out of the world, but like to check in with yourself. And so as long as technology is not disrupting that, then so be it. Use your technology. But for me, I don't run with my phone. I don't run with anything. I'm completely checked out, and try to enjoy the adventure of getting lost on purpose. I make that a habit of getting lost on purpose. And so because wisdom will hit you very, very differently. Um, and and so yeah, so yeah, I think it's a good thing that social media, there's a lot of attention to these communities, but on the run, it's a different thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think maybe the getting lost on purpose might be a bit of a lost art these days. So that's it's very insightful. I like that. One thing we were also curious about too is, obviously we just talked about, you did the run in 2004, and the book came out in 2020. So what was the path towards actually writing the book? Did you know right away? Like, did you know in 2005 that you wanted to write that story someday, or did it take some time for you to get there?
It definitely took a lot of time. I knew I wanted to do something with it. I had a journal, really small journal that wrote really small. I just keeping it was just my way of processing things when I had downtime, and putting words to what I was feeling in ways that I never didn't know. I didn't know a lot of words, right? Like I said, I didn't speak. I never felt like I mastered the English language. I had a fear of language, just how by nature of how I was raised in my community, and it wasn't always the safest thing to speak out or to speak your language. And so I had a lot of catching up to do, including carrying the dictionary that I did on the run. That was the only book I carried on the run was a dictionary, because I tell people that was the only. I thought that all the books in the world would be in that dictionary. I just had to reformulate them and create books in my head. But anyway, they entertained me, and but I knew at the very least it was very much family oriented. I wanted to do it for myself and for my family. Maybe I wanted to bring honor to my family. I wanted to honor the legacy. I wanted to honor the retransform the pain of movement, because movement to us is migration, and leaving your family is in pain. And I didn't I didn't want that to haunt me for the rest of my life, or my future generation. I wanted to complicate our understanding and our relation to movement. So yeah, I definitely wanted to do something. I didn't know what it would look like, but it was very much something for my family. I wanted to sort of have something for them, and then it took me years to just figure out that maybe I could tell it to a larger community. There's some reservation and hesitation, because part of it is I was asking myself whether I wanted to out my family, their story, and what they're still enduring, and was it safe for me to do that? And so I wanted to protect my family too, and I wanted to protect the runners. And so there's a lot of conversations that I had, but at the end of the day, I realized, you know what? I have an obligation. We have an obligation to put that out there, to educate and bring healing to our communities, even if there's a level of risk, because the risk is already there and it's coming to us, and it has for years. We've been displaced already for so many years. I was tired of letting others displace our story, to telling, I don't want others telling our story anymore. And so I wanted to sort of add to that conversation, and it reached a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there who who who, who felt like the story, spoke to them. And so I was touched, because I thought I was alone. For years, I thought I was alone in this. And for years, Peace and Dignity Journeys was like the longest kept secret that I had amongst my people. There's only a few people who knew that for a long time, and I didn't think anybody cared. I just said this is a thing I did. This was a ceremony, and I just did it for myself and my family. And that's it. But I got something clicked, and it said, no, you got a lot of work to do. So writing, it became my medium by which to reach people. So I'm very fortunate.
And speaking of that too, you say in the book towards the end that you were working security at a Boston museum while you were writing the book, and I'm just curious, especially here in Eugene, like we have a lot of local writers, we have a very active writing community, and everyone's always fascinated in what someone's just process is like day to day. So, what was like your day to day life while you were actually writing Spirit Run?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, well, I do that because of just maybe the trauma of being working class. I just feel like I can never leave it, and so I'm always circling back to these spaces as a way to stay connected to the community somehow. And so I feel safer sometimes in these working class spaces, where I don't know, people just sometimes don't see you, think twice about, I don't know, there's just something about being in these observant roles that are very comfortable to me now, in a way, where as a security guard, it was enjoyable just sort of see people who didn't even, have conversations with you, didn't think you were worth the conversation until they realized you had something to say. So it was kind of a time out for me. And um, another thing for me is that I need to do. something completely opposite. Maybe I can recommend this to the other writers. Is I need to do something completely opposite to writing, so that I miss it enough, so that when I get back to my writing, I have the energy to do it. And so writing entails sitting, writing in your own mind, solitary. So then I try to do something that's maybe physical. There's a lot of movement. It's just I'm doing something completely different. So when I come and sit down, I have the time to do that. So I guess security work allowed me to do that. Um, I wasn't spent on writing. You know, I don't have the batteries to do full-time writing, one gig, and then come and write some more in the evenings on a book or something. I just I'll burn out quicker. And so if I'm doing something completely different, and then taking on jobs that are like for me, like, don't always burn me out too much intellectually either, that I have some mental power to get back to my writing afterwards. So, and then just not having shame in taking on whatever job you have to get the job done. Writing is hard, and it still is. And for me, it's weird to think about myself as a writer, right? I'm still very much working class, and I still plug into those kinds of jobs, and I try to still do that. And so if I ever make it big, I'm always going to continue doing the jobs, security or whatever. You meet some great people, people who respect you and engage you and can teach you some really powerful things. And yeah, I don't know if that explains.
Oh yeah, I think for sure it does. And again, we discussed this in our book group about how you kind of look back in history through some writers who we still talk about today, and so many of them had. We were talking about like so many of them had day jobs, and so we were like speculating as to pretty much exactly what you said. Like, I wonder if it was like the exact opposite of what it feels like to write a book, to be like be up and active and interacting with people, and it makes a lot
And
of
then,
sense. So
yeah, and then also just being accountable to your community. Like I feel like if you're someone who likes to interview or write nonfiction and wants to write about the world, get into those, get out into the world. Like, roll up your sleeves and sweat. Like, see what it takes to live in that world, to work in that world. Then you can write. It'll change your writing. And sometimes, like, I'm a philosophy major. Even I can't work in the abstract. I have to smell my world. I have to like meet the potential people. The people I write about. I have to be there, and it does so much for the writing, and it brings healing, like, because you get to experience that world to some degree, right? And you get to live it, and so it makes writing even more exciting, and it gives you so much more passion than just always working in an isolated space. So get those jobs, go on those. If you're if you can't, and if for whatever reason, maybe we're not the right people to tell those stories. If for whatever reason we can't get into those spaces or are too uncomfortable, or etc. So yeah, just my 2 cents.
well, I don't do much writing myself, but I think it's great advice. It sounds like very practical, which I think is there's not a ton of practical advice out there sometimes when it comes to doing something creative. So I appreciate that perspective. So we wanted to we were talking about this before we went live too, about there's a chapter in your book where you visit Eugene. So readers definitely dive in and have a look there. It's pretty fun. I was wondering just if there's anything about Eugene that didn't make it into the book that you remember. It's totally fine. It's been obviously it's been like 17 years, so I know
Yeah,
you might not remember much, but I was just curious if maybe there was anything else about Eugene that just didn't quite make the cut.
Nothing comes to mind, but I'll be honest with you. This book was, if I had it my way, it would have been 800 pages.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the end of the day, it just, there's certain things that just take priority, and so there are other runners, and I wish that they would write and their books, and I hope the conversation continues about what Peace and Dignity Journey is.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
I wish I knew.
yeah. I knew you were. It was only probably a day or two that you were in town, so it's we don't take it
But it was
personally.
memorable enough to talk
Yes.
about.
Speaking of which, I do need to ask about X-Man. And again, so if you haven't read the book, definitely read the book. And anyone who's lived in Eugene for a time will read Noe's passage there and just be like, oh yeah, that's definitely Eugene. So this man named X-Man who claimed to be a fortune teller, he did actually predict some things for you, and I just have to ask, did he get anything right in his
Oh
predictions?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. And so me at being 19 and just the way that the whole experience unraveled was just it just hit me hard, right? And so much so that I had to pull away, I had to pull back. So at a certain point, you just don't want to know things, right? You just it takes away the mystique of what your journey is, and you got too close. um, yeah, it was something else. I never
yeah,
experienced anything like that before.
yeah,
The way that it happened in Eugene.
cool, yeah. And I just, X-Man, if you're out there, we appreciate you.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah. He I think that's, to be honest, that's what he introduced into my ear. This whole thought of this idea of maybe I could do something with what's going on with the run. So
yeah,
definitely a lot to be thankful
yeah.
to that person and Eugene space. So it was transformative for sure.
Yeah, and I think it really, and no joking, it really does sum up Eugene well, I think, because like you can have an interaction in Eugene and just come away thinking like that was really weird and also one of the most profound things I've ever experienced. So,
Right. Right.
yeah, yeah, awesome. All right. Well, I think we're kind of getting to the time where if anyone is watching that does have questions, I think we could pop a few in the chat. I have a few more um, Q&A type things that people sent in, ahead of time or like staff, wanted to ask. So while we're waiting to see if anyone does have a question, I was also just thinking we could talk quickly about 2024 because I believe that's when the next Peace and Dignity journeys are. Is that correct?
As far as I understand, yeah,
Yeah.
they're always evolving given COVID and all, but yeah, things have been in session, planning session for quite a while, and I think the people are pretty much in place, but I'm not as much connected to this year as I would like. But yeah, people can follow, Peace and Dignity journeys. Um, just on Instagram, figure out what people are doing, and it's still very much, I guess I wouldn't say underground, like, because we're very much trying to get ourselves out there as publicly as possible, especially now since it's a very urgent times right now. And so
Yep.
you can plug in for a day, join the run for a day, join the run for a weekend, but of course, it all depends on who's organizing it and see if there's space, if there's need or whatever. So just look into your local community and reach out to your local tribe, whatever, and indigenous communities and figure it out. And it takes work, to find sometimes, but that means that maybe you're that much more distant from the work that's needed, right? And so I think it's a way to find your local indigenous community and figure out how you can do the work with or without Peace and Dignity journeys. Does that make sense? And so, but once you find them, it's a family, and it's a journey for sure. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly where, but generally they definitely hit the coast, Alaska. I know that in 2020, they were going to run all the way down to Ecuador. So from the northern route all the way down. So they're expanding, they're getting bigger. There's East Coast routes too, Midwest. So everywhere you look, there's something. So I'm sure you just got to ask around, got to do it the old school way, I guess. Reach out to someone who knows someone who knows someone. and,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. And I think maybe we probably have touched on this a little bit, so I apologize if I'm like repeating myself or making you repeat yourself. But is there
no,
anything that you would like to impart upon the next generation of runners, perhaps, who are going to be doing this in 2024 and beyond?
yeah, no, that's a great. I mean, a lot of things. I I think it's all about confidence, and following your heart. At the end of the day, that'll lead you to a good place. And don't let people shut you down. Like, just be open to your community, to developing community. And again, what running is about is all about carrying your community forward. You can't do it alone. This is the reason why there's a whole organization dedicated to this. create your own community, just like people are creating their book clubs, their running clubs. Create your own club if you can't find it. Have the courage to do that, and create your community, because someone needs you to do that, and someone might not be ready to do that, and they need you to go out there and find them. And so have a conversation about what you want to do and how you want to connect with yourself, how you're going to bring change to your community in ways that benefits everybody, because there's a lot of sadness out there, and don't hold that sadness in, don't hold that trauma in. And what running does, it's physical for a reason. It allows you to shake off a lot of that trauma, shake off, at least just for a moment, right? And whatever moment you can get, um, you know, whatever free moment you can get, just take it. That's success right there. And so it doesn't have to be long. But I think like they say, our youth, they're our future. And I think for me, part of the delay in my journey in doing the things that I did is that I didn't have the confidence in myself. And then most importantly, I didn't have the self-love, right, for myself. I had so much shame. I had I was motivated by anger. I was motivated by sadness. And so there's a lot of that right now. And so let that motivate you. But at the end of the day, let it motivate you so that one day you're motivated by love and happiness until we get there. But we're not there yet, And so um, I think we just got to get out, And I love my technology, but I think sometimes we need to get out um, of our houses and get out into the community, show people that we're there to receive them, And so it's a beautiful thing, and the youth are leading peace and dignity journeys right now, and it's something different than when I used to do it, and that's how it ought to be. It ought to evolve and change to meet the needs of our youth and our community, because losing too many kids to drugs and mental health issues, it's just too much. So let them have the conversation, let them lead it, and let us adults follow them, figure this out, because we as adults also gotta take a step back sometimes, and let the kids show us how to do things for once.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. And we got a question while you were speaking,
Mhm.
very beautifully on that question. So thank you for that. So Tim asked, just wondering why dehydration was such an issue on your run. Tap water is drinkable here in the States, and yet it seemed water was often in short supply. And also just props to Tim. He's also ran a marathon and several half marathons, and agrees that staying hydrated is very important.
Yeah, no, 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 thank you. A lot of logistical mishaps for sure, and I think that was on that coordination situation. Just utilizing the resources properly. We had a lot of runners coming in and out. We only had so many resources, so much food available to us at any given time, and obviously people were welcome to it as often, And so, um, and then it was given what I said about just different people had different interpretations of what it meant to suffer, what it meant to run. Um, there was some people getting involved in the dishing out of certain resources, right, in ways that they thought fell in line with their vision of what was good for the run, right? And so, and that wasn't always it. Not to mention, like, we were running hard miles. We were drinking a lot. We needed a lot, and so sometimes we couldn't get to town fast enough to do that. Our coordinators couldn't do that fast enough. There was divisions, on the run at times, and so sometimes a lot of things the ball got dropped, and so yeah. I mean, like I said, it was hard. I think um, coordinating things back in the day. I think it's a lot easier now, and there are different challenges. But yeah, that definitely was an issue. Things got harder in Mexico, that's for sure. When language barrier, there's a language barrier for some folks too, and resources were tougher out there, um, and not everything was available for eating, and not everybody had the resources to provide, right? So a lot of reasons why things didn't go the way they ought to.
right. Just gonna see if anyone else wants to chime in with a question. I don't think anyone else is in the chat or watching right now. I wonder if you wouldn't mind just talking about some of your writing influences, who some of your favorite authors or writers are.
Well, that's a great question. That was also something that I don't know. I was a bit more reserved about, just because, to be honest, that wasn't my reality growing up.
Mhm.
I didn't read very much growing up, and that culturally, whatever, for whatever reason, I didn't know that that was something I was interested in, or so I have a lot to make up for, as far as who I need to read. I'm very much into realism, writers, old school realism writers. I thought I wanted to do magical realism at first, right? I just love just the lyricalness of it all. But I learned really early on that before you can write lyrically and do that, your writing has to be firmly grounded in details, right? In real details. And so if you do that, even if you're in realism, your realism, if you do it well, like there, it can be magical, right? There's magical elements to just writing, the things that you observe without being necessarily lyrical, right? And so I learned to sort of change that. I I I I just go randomly to bookstores and get a book, flip through it, and just sort of try to read a solid paragraph. And if that paragraph is thick and textured and there's just something there, I'll take that, And so the language is important to me. But Borges is one of the earlier authors that I've read, that I was inspired by. I like Calvino's innovative inventiveness, just the joy of his world. Um, but just realism of any sort for sure. Um, I've been reading some narrative, like journalism, like Dakelh, right? I mean, just it's all over really the place. I really don't discriminate. Um, but I wish I could be a little more specific. To be honest, I don't. It's new to me. I'm still catching up on a lot of authors right now.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, I think almost everyone who works on staff here at EPL feels that way. So you're in good company.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Um, and then I guess I think if we're about to wrap up, one more question. Do you have any projects on the horizon, or are you thinking about working on anything, or are you working on anything?
Yeah, actually, I'm fortunate enough to be under contract for a second book. Got other ideas as well. It's where I need to be, I work with the mindset that each book could be my last, and I was fortunate enough to have one book out, and I'm fine if that's the only one that ever comes out. But it's who I am. I don't know what I'd be without it. I finally figured out a way to unclog myself of my what's in my head, what's in my heart. So I'm always going to be writing no matter what, just like I was before I got published. I took on writing as a form of expression and healing. And so keep a journal. I'm still very old school. I have I'm like I have a journal and I have my pens, and I'll write that. And I'll do my chicken scratch, and then I only use a computer to transcribe that. So I rarely do I use a computer to generate creativity. Just by the nature of how I do things, I move. I'm in the rain. I'm not taking a computer out in the rain in the bushes or whatever. So it's transportable. It's mobile, and it just unclogs me. And so such a beautiful way. But yeah, the goal is to continue to generate as much as possible because I'm always up at night thinking about things and excited about things, and I feel like I have a place now in the community with stories and trying to show people that there's a lot of medicine in storytelling.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to book number two. Um,
Thank you.
thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're ready to wrap up. I don't. I think we're. Do we have any other questions? So, gosh, thank you so much. This has been just a lovely conversation, and it's been really, really great to just hear your thoughts on everything and dive a little deeper. So the book is Spirit Run by Noe Alvarez. You can check it out from the Eugene Public Library. The audiobook is on Hoopla. You could go and check that out right this second. And maybe even go for a run while you listen to it, if that's your thing. I know it's not for everybody, but but yeah, readily available at the library. And Noe Alvarez, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you, Eugene. Thank you, Eugene Library. Appreciate you all for having me. Pleasure. Not that far these days, no longer in Boston, Seattle. So maybe one day we'll reconnect in person.
Sounds awesome. I would love that. All right. Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Take care.